where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out.
On the 4th of October 2019 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. Friday Jobber, our magazine program that we normally have once a week, and normally it is aired, posted on various channels either early Friday morning or sometime on Friday, just to make sure we get that one straight. And this weekend we're working on several programs on Beyond World, that's the international channel. We have the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China. We'll get that to you. There's a presentation there by the Chinese Red Army, and also an address by President Xi Jinping. We think it's important because it is a benchmark, and China is a very important country in the scheme of things, second largest economy in the world, and is now prominent in the news. In fact, DJ Trump is now asking China to investigate the Biden family, the Biden clan, or whatever you want to call it there, via the activities of Joe Biden, who is running for president, his son Hunter Biden, a person with, in our opinion, a bit of a dodgy background there, but nonetheless, there's been investigations into Ukraine, and they've amounted to zero. But this is a part of the presentation that we'll make around the crystal ball. That's Larry Sabato's shop at the University of Virginia, and as we always do, we honor Heather Heyer, who was killed by white supremacists literally in downtown Charlottesville. This edition of the Crystal Ball on the 3rd of October 2019, Kyle Klondike is the managing editor of the Crystal Ball. And as opposed to the Crystal Ball, we here at the Boston Red Network have the Ouija board. So now it's up to various dubious type of situations, crystal balls and Ouija boards. But American politics is somewhat a crystal ball and somewhat a Ouija board, somewhat hocus pocus. And what we'll talk about here is the nationalization of politics. Thomas P. Tip O'Neill, who represented part of Boston at one time, and he was Speaker of the House of Representatives, motto was, all politics are local. Well, that does stand on certain things, but with an increased globally connected society, and the cities are connected. An example, we had the Black Lives Movement. Of course, we had the murder of various people. Mr. Wright in Cleveland, Mr. Brown in Ferguson outside of St. Louis, Sandra Bland in Texas, and various others. So in other words, the issue of police murders, police brutality, was nationalized and also internationalized when we had the murder of Justine in Minneapolis, Dion, that was literally brutally shot in her night clothes, walking in the alley, seeing if a police unit had pulled up there. So those are some examples of nationalized issues. We have Medicare for all, a large number of people that receive Medicare benefits, over 65, disabled, what have you. That's across the 50 continuous states that is happening. And also another program out there called Medicaid. That is nationalized. States participate in it. The federal government does the bulk of it. So if you look at it, basically the background of many things, it is increasingly nationalized. If you look at such things as the Federal Emergency Management Agency becoming more nationalized, we have floods in parts of the South, tornadoes and floods in Florida, Puerto Rico, earthquakes in California, forest fires in California and in the mountainous West. All of these things play into it, and at the same time, we of course have national elections. So this is where we get to it here. The Senate ratings changes, and the shadow of impeachment is the topic this week for the people at the Crystal Ball. If there is a trial in the upper chamber, who might feel the heat? Well, that would obviously depend on where you sat in the political scheme of things. Obviously, in areas that DJ Trump did very well, and the Democrats picked up some seats in the 2018 election. There could be something going there. But let's get to key points here. Nationalization is an increasingly important trend in American election outcomes. It's hard to think of more nationalizing issue than a presidential impeachment. Well, in modern times, we have sat through one presidential impeachment of William Jefferson Clinton. He was impeached by the House of Representatives. At the time, was under the leadership of one Newt Leroy Gingrich. But it went to the Senate, where the Democrats ruled the roost. Of course, Strom Thurmond was there. In the Senate, he was there, and the presiding officer was the late Justice, a right-winger from Arizona, Rehnquist. But it amounted to nothing more than folly. Anyway, in other words, vulnerable members on both sides in the Senate will have a lot to consider if and when they cast a vote on convicting Trump as a potential Senate if there is one, of an impeachment trial. Well, the trial would go on, and of course it seems to be expanding. What they wanted to do in the House was have about a 2-week process there, very quickly looking at Ukraine and looking at the whistleblower's complaint and the so-called roadmap that it generated, and see where they go from there. A number of people obviously would be called to testify, give their best evidence, etc., plus the whistleblower, good for TV there. But now DJ Trump has enlarged the circumference. That's usually what you do in many times in a criminal case, particularly in a civil case. You want to expand it as far as possible. In other words, if you have potentially 2 or 3 defendants, you want to expand that to as many as you can get in, particularly if it's a conspiracy. You start out with maybe 2 or 3 defendants, and during the course of your litigation, You come up with 5 or 6, or maybe 7 or 8, maybe 10, and then start measuring where they're involved in the particular case. And nonetheless, this is how this particular situation is going. There are 2 Senate rating changes this week, one benefiting each side. The most vulnerable senator, Doug Jones, he's from Alabama, moved from a toss-up to lean Republican, while the Senator Thor Tillis, he's in North Carolina, moves from lean Republican to a toss-up. Well, North Carolina is one of these states that is moving from the Republican gate more towards a sort of, I would call it a neutral gate there. But Doug Jones, of course, being a very red state like Alabama, was always in danger no matter what was happening. It depends if they run Judge Moore against him. Well, a little different situation there. But perhaps even Judge Moore could slip by this time around. One doesn't know. There's a map here, states that have no elections this time around. I'll name those: Washington, California, Nevada, Utah, North Dakota, Missouri, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, and Vermont. Now, if we go into states like Oregon, that is safe there, and according to them. And let's see, we have New Mexico likely there, Minnesota likely there, and we can get into some of these Senate races here where we see red sticking around here. States like Texas. Texas is very interesting. It will depend, obviously, on the candidates in Texas. Montana has shown that it's amenable to electing members of the Democratic Party. And Kansas has been a little bit different late there. In Iowa, let's see. It says leans Republican there. I'm not sure who the candidates are. Illinois is a sure thing, according to them. And let's see who else around here that's having anything going on. Likely is in Michigan. Well, Michigan has changed, no doubt about that, with our friend there, Ms. Talibi there, Rashada Talibi, having the historic seat that John Conyers once held there. And, of course, Massachusetts, we know how that is going now. It is going to be an interesting race there between, I believe, it's Joe Kennedy and Senator Markley. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has endorsed Senator Markley. So that'd be an interesting situation versus Joe Kennedy. I'd assume he is the hero, more or less, of the traditional liberal crowd, at least part of it. So let's go a little bit further here. We can name some of these states and where they go. In other words, impeachment, a major overall theme in American political life is nationalization of politics. How people feel about the president is bleeding down to the ballot to an extreme degree, to that point where congressional expert Gary Jacobson observed that the 2018 election was the most sweeping national referendum on any administration, at least since the Great Depression, not to be confused with the last Depression. This helps explain the 2018 results when Democrats swept the House but lost ground in the Senate because they held too many seats in states that trended so far to the right in the presidential election. Well, if you have a state that is trended very, very far to the left, it's almost utterly impossible for a Democratic candidate to run and win. Now, the exception to that would be, say, a Heisman Trophy winner, some football player, athlete type that's well known in that particular state, and people like him or her, and there's more of an even chance going there. This trend showed up in 2016 too. Every state with a Senate race voted the same party for the Senate and for the president for the first time in the history of Senate popular election. At one time, we did not have Senate popular elections. Nationalization seems very germane when assessing the Democrats' drive for impeaching Trump in the House and possible impeachment trial in the Senate. In what is already a nationalized political time, impeachment may be the ultimate nationalizing event for members of the House and Senate. An up and down vote on the continuation of the Trump presidency in advance of the president's presidential general election would be on president event in our lifetime. It would be occurring at a time when down ballot politics is more defined by opinions of presidents than at any time in most, if not all, of our lifetime. It is because of the particular presidents in the White House. That is one reason at this mic we've looked at this impeachment situation as probability, as a problem, in the sense that if you look at it dialectically, it has plus and has minuses included in it. However, though, if things really go wrong, then there's a severe downside to it. As far as the Democratic Party is concerned, they could lose some Senate seats they should have won. They could also lose some House seats they recently picked up, because that nature is very tricky, period. Now, only a little more than a third of the Senate is up for election in 2020, 35 out of 100 seats, while certain members of the Senate not for election this year might be an unpredicted vote. Willard Romney, he's out of Utah, nothing there. Joe Meacham, well, he'll go along to stay along, depending. Of course, he's in his 60s now. Let's just focus on the seats up next year. There's a major political fallout, if there is, over impeachment one way or the other. One would expect it to happen in this cycle as opposed to future ones. Maybe not. When this impeachment battle may be, politically speaking, ancient history, it has been in ancient history by maybe by November 2020. That's how quick cycles move these days. Well, we're in that situation. It'll be the first impeachment battle that we had with true social media. Now, we did have the internet when President Clinton was impeached, but not the social media. There was no Facebook around, etc., not instantaneous there. Things were not as well organized. Also, our data sets of big data, we did not have at that time. But now you can measure anything. The senator on the ballot next year who is clearly represented in enemy territory, Doug Jones. Of course, Doug Jones has been a civil rights lawyer in Alabama for a very long time. People know him. Almost certainly needs to attract a significant amount of crossover support. But Trump won Alabama by 28 points. I haven't seen any polling there lately on him. We'll look to that to see how he's faring this time around. If he votes to acquit or burns some already rickety bridges with Trump voters, if he votes to convict, well, it depends. Obviously, if it's a situation in the Senate where there are not enough votes for impeachment, he doesn't need to waste anything, because it just would not happen. In truth, our toss-up rating in Alabama was being generous to Jones. Well, it was. And this is one of the things that has always sort of disturbed me. Now, obviously, when our Ouija board model ratings are not that well known, obviously. They're accurate, but they're not that well known, so it doesn't matter if we decide to put a little entertainment in and juice something occasionally. We rarely do that. I think one instance where we did that in the past election. While it is true Jones may again face Roy Moore, he is a disastrously bad GOP opponent from December of 2016's special election. All likely another Republican should win the nomination. Even Jones versus would probably be a toss-up at best. Well, Jones versus Roy Moore. Well, yeah, Roy Moore has been winning races in Alabama for a long time. So we're moving the race to leans Republican, formalizing Jones as the most vulnerable incumbent in the next cycle there. The one possible exception might be Ed Markey. We talked about Ed Markey, who faces stiff primary challenger in Joe Kennedy. He's from Mass 4 in the Commonwealth. Well, yeah, no. Depends how they look at that particular race. Other Democrats up who may have trouble in Senate with a Senate vote represents smaller margins. That's Gary Peters. He's from Michigan. His small and his smallest loss. Jean Sheehan. She's from New Hampshire. They both rated lean Democrats, matching our electoral college rating in those states. Neither appear to be leading the Democratic drumbeat on impeachment. Well, they won't, because that action is happening in the House. Of course, and it's also evident so far in the case of Cory Gardner. He's from Colorado, and Susan Collins. Susan Collins is a little more elusive than Gardner, who are the only two Republicans up for re-election next year from states that Hillary Clinton won. In fact, they're the only two Clinton state Republican senators, period. These states are not quite as blue as commonly believed. Colorado turned to Democrats only recently. It is, but they now have a governor there, the Democrat, and he's also gay. So it has turned differently than the old hardline Bible thumpers that used to run Colorado. Even the Democrat, and I can't think, Romer was his name. He was a Democrat, but he was a right-wing Democrat, a champion of charter schools. A respected margin of victory for sure, but not overwhelming one. Meanwhile, only backed Clinton by 3 and very slim to a margin of victory. Gardner and Collins are keeping their options close to the vest, no doubt about that. Well, they won't have to worry about that until he literally gets to the Senate. Collins has had various transgressions, if I use the term Jesse Jackson would use before. Whereas Collins, the crossover appeal, I don't know what the people are thinking about there. Anyway, the confirmation battle over Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, that would be the thing that probably would do a vote to quit Trump. Might nationalize Collins even further, although at the moment we are keeping her race rated leans Republican. Gardner, meanwhile, has generally positioned himself as pro-Trump following the president's election, although that doesn't he doesn't yell from the rooftop. No doubt about it. He doesn't want to yell too far. They hear him across Denver. And Gardner's seat in the second likeliest to flip party next fall, behind Jones. Well, yeah, he could flip, and he should have never flipped in the first place out there. But I'll have to ask Jane Swartley about that. She's, of course, down in Boulder. And the other two vulnerable senators. Oh, this is Martha McSally. Well, Martha McSally, Ms. Sinema beat her out there, and Sinema used to be a Green. As for Tillis, now he's in North Carolina. Hard to say on him. A lot of it's going to be voter turnout in North Carolina. But McSally was riding on a tide in the desert, so to speak. Now there's a business type that's taken on Tillis named Garland Tuck, as the incumbent has dropped to $2 million in the primary. Well, he's got a lot of money. McSally and Tillis should both be okay in their primaries, but pressure from the right likely will keep them in line with their parties. Now, could deprive them of crossover support in some states that backed Trump by 3.5 points. Usually that would be enough. McSally's already firm in the toss-up column, and we moved Tillis to that rating also. Well, McSally, she's in the Senate by accident. She's virtually not won an election, period. They appointed her. The Democratic field is uncertain, but the preferred pick from D.C. appears to be Cal Cunningham, has ran before. A veteran and one former one-term state senator who lost the primary in 2010. I remember when he lost that primary. Cunningham does not have the profile of an obvious top-tier recruit, although the last two winners of this seat, Tillis and a former senator, McKay Hagan, did not have elected experience beyond the state legislative either. It was unfortunate when she was defeated out of the situation there. One final point where there's potential vulnerable senators here are left out, such as Senator Perdue, he's from Georgia, and Joni Ernest. Well, Joni Ernest is an interesting type. She's now divorced out of Iowa, was in with the religious types at one time there. And of course, Iowa has turned to the right. The Democratic Party in Iowa is in need of rebuilding now, perhaps with Bernie's organization there. Is a good organization, and Liz Warren and various other people that are organizing. Some of that organization can be carried on past the Iowa caucuses to the Iowa Democratic Party. Incidentally, I want to wish Senator Sanders, whom we support in the presidential primary, although not a Democrat, well in his recuperation. I can understand the stent, the heart blockage problem, and blockage problems myself, and we're still resolving them. So those blockages can come about. Bernie had chest pains. We got ours through a blood test. But anyway, nonetheless, and they did the procedure very quickly. They did the angioplastic, the angiogram, and then they did the angioplastic. The angiogram is very, very similar. The angioplastic, they used a balloon, they open up the artery, and then they put some stents in to keep it open, and they also give you blood thinners. Anyway, so much for the medical update here. I have to tell Mary in Montana that we're still around. I guess she thought we dropped off the face of the earth. Anyway, let's get on with this. We have no clue when the Senate trial or vote on the removing the president might occur, but the timing may be important. No doubt about that. That's one of our misgivings about this also. It's how quick in any type of proceeding, whether it be a civil trial or a criminal trial, it's very difficult, especially a civil trial, and this impeachment is more of a civil trial, to estimate how long it's going to take, because if Trump keeps expanding it, that's the more time you need to devote to investigation, and once you get investigation, you get witnesses, and then you got to follow those leads, and it does take longer to do it. Anyway, back to this. If there are senators on either side of the aisle who decide they want to buck their party on impeachment, it might be an easy decision if they can cast their vote after the major party filing deadlines. Some of them deadlines helpfully compiled by the Daily Cause, a list there with Senate seats on the ballot next year and are coming up. I think they have it down here. I looked at it earlier. These filing deadlines, some of those are 34 senators next year. Georgia has 2. Have filing deadlines that come before the end of January. Well, they have to get on with it. And here's our filing deadlines here. Doug Jones, he's going to have to file by the 8th of November. And Sullivan, Arkansas, next year, January 1. Tom Cotton picking Cotton, let's see, the 11th of November. McSally, the toss-up, 6th of April. That's next year, so she has a longer time. Gardner, the 17th of March, and Johnny Eisenman, who is retiring, would be the 6th of March. Purdue, the same thing, that's in Georgia. Ernest, the 13th of March. That year of next year, that is after the caucuses are over. And Durbin, if he runs in Illinois anyway, second there. And Roberts, he's already retired. That will be on January the 1st. An interesting day. January the 1st, they'll be closed. So I guess they have to file before that while they're still sober. January the 10th in Kentucky, old McConnell should file. And Hopalong Cassidy, that's the 17th of July. They say that is safe Republican in the state of Louisiana. Ed Markley, the 5th of May, after May Day, that's in the Commonwealth. And Colin, 16th of March. Well, with Super Tuesday coming up and all that coming up, a lot of the presidential stuff will be over. Same with Gary Peter and in Michigan. And Tina Smith, she's in Minnesota. 2nd of June, well, a long time there. Old Cindy Smith down in Mississippi, the 10th of January. And Steve Daines, he's out like a Republican, that's in Montana. It might be a race there. And that toss-up race just before Santa comes down the chimney, 20th of December, that's in North Carolina. Ben Soucy, I think is how you pronounce that. That's March 1st. That is in Nebraska, State Republican. Gene Sheehan leans Democrat, the 12th of June. And Cory Booker, the Twitter king, who's running for president, 3rd of March. It seems he'll be filing again. And Tom Udall, he's not in it anymore. The 10th of March in New Mexico. Ian Hoff, he's too old. The 10th of April, I guess he'll be there. until they literally carry him out the door. Senator Merkley of Oregon, that's the Tampa State Democrat. Jack Reed, he's in Rhode Island, he'll be there also. The 24th of June. Old Lindsey Graham, the 30th of March, that's in South Carolina. Rounds in South Dakota, State Republican, the 31st of March. And Alexander in Tennessee, he is retired. So that's one day after April Fool's Day. So we have Mark Warner. He'll keep running until he runs out of gas. Like a Democrat in Virginia, probably no doubt about that. And Capitol Moore, she's in West Virginia. They say Republican. That's in January, the 25th of March. Mike Inslee, he's out of Wyoming. He's leaving, and I guess Cheney's daughter is coming there, and it leads to something. What is it? Iverson, he's retired at the end of the year, so forth and so on. And the conclusion they made, well, impeachment on certain direction. We would be lying if we said we had a great sense as to how the Democratic drive to impeach Trump will impact the election next year. But yeah, very difficult to say at this time. We have been modeling this, and I suppose one, and we'll get to that in a minute, is Joe Biden. How is it affecting Joe Biden? Well, Joe Biden's fundraising was lousy, but Joe Biden started going south before the fundraising got in there. Don't be surprised if, for all the noise and the impeachment inquiry, even a successful House vote for impeachment and subsequent Senate trial doesn't lead to sharp changes in public attitudes. That could very well be. Meanwhile, the presidential ratings, as it's seen, have remained largely fixed in their mid-40s and disapproval over 50%, and that's the end of this one right here. And let me run over here. I think we're going to have to go to another screen here and find where Joe Biden is. Oops. Joe Biden. Here we go. This is from Reuters, incidentally, but Biden lags behind old Buttigieg with Sanders and Buttigieg with 15.2 million in quarterly fundraising there. He hadn't been fundraising very much to his supporters, but he can get more money once his PACs get rolling, unless they pull the rug out from Mono Joe's second quarter take, which also lagged Biden's second quarter take. These figures of 21.5 came as a former vice president. He's on two fronts. I think we talked about two fronts, running in the Democratic contest and also perceived a national election against DJ Trump. Is this the cart before the horse? It is a cart before the horse. Well, our own Senator Elizabeth Warren has chipped away at his lead in national polls. We'll get to some of those national polls in a minute. Meanwhile, Biden said Thursday that both Trump should be looked into. So his son doubling down an invitation from foreign governments to interfere in the election. That can be dangerous. Do the voters see it as interference? One of the big problems that the Democrats have at this point in time, people are not paying very close attention to the impeachment inquiry so far. Why is that? Well, it's centering on foreign governments, and in general, people pay less attention to, first of all, foreign news, secondly, foreign policy, and thirdly, they have better things to do. We have the baseball playoffs there. Incidentally, the Los Angeles Dodgers won, 4-1 or something like that. That was a 5-0 over the Nationals, 5-0, I think. And the Nats were able. The Nats, excuse me, and the Cardinals a 7-6. It's a close game at the last over the Atlanta team in Atlanta. So that's what we're on there. And of course, I guess someone watching soccer and someone watching the NFL. They're watching everything. And his party, meanwhile, joined the race. This is what DJ Trump rose, and this is the reason that we try to impress upon people: if you are engaging in the Democratic contest, you do need to donate to these candidates. They really do need the money to move forward. Now, for progressive people, we have to spend our money wisely. And if you look at it in terms of the progressive candidates, I'm talking about Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, that are pushing Medicare for all, especially in contributions to them, because they are pushing basic issues that we need to push. We need to saturate the media with those, the media with those, whether it be on the cable stations, Facebook, etc. Because we not only, as President Obama would say, looking at it from 2020, but we're looking at 2024, 2028, 2032, and so forth and so on. Anyway, they raked in DJ Trump and his operation $125 million. Congress must file detail of fundraising. Oh, well, yeah, okay. By the 15th of October. Biden's top donors at a fundraiser in Palo Alto, and you can expect that. We haven't raised what a lot of people have. We got started way late. Well, hell, that's no excuse. We raised this quarter $15 million in the middle of the summer. Well, in the middle of the summer, people are spending their money on trips to Coney Island, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, his campaign manager, Greg Swartz, said his candidate and their team, including over 200 staff members across the country, in a very strong position. Well, I hope they are. Hope they don't become unemployed. The question any campaign faces at this point is whether or not you have the resources to compete early in states to sustain your efforts. Swartz said in a statement, "Our campaign unequivocally does and builds on our strength each week." Well, I don't doubt that at all. Biden's campaign said early Thursday that it would spend $6 million of the $36.7 million it has raised so far on a set of TV and digital ads in states to kick off the Democratic nomination contest early next February. Now, in those states, Iowa, and the polls haven't shown him, just barely holding on to New Hampshire, South Carolina, but that's a state he didn't really need to spend very much money in. Early polls show Biden likely to be a strong candidate. Fell just 2 points to 18% in late September. That's the Reuters Democratic leading after launches impeachment trial, but he has fallen 12 points in polls since June, and Warren trails him now just by 4 points in most polls. Well, that is a big problem there. There's no doubt about it. But some other things that play in here, and on the Numbers Man show, anyway, HP, or Hewlett Packard, they now called HP Incorporated. We used to be a reseller for them. It will cut up to 16% of its workforce as part of restructuring. Those are real people and real jobs. So we're starting to see more and more of this coming on here. And this is from Reuters. We also have recession risk. We'll go into this on the Numbers Man show. It's a macroeconomics program, but what we will say here is the service sector activity has slowed to a 3-year low in September amidst rising concerns about tariffs. But tariffs are not the only thing out here. Coming on the heels of news this week, but manufacturing activity plunged to a 10-year low. That's our friends in Tempe, Arizona, Institute for Supply Management. And also the Fed has been pushing money into the system, some $75 billion. Now, labor resources and direction of the economy, people are concerned about that. And that doesn't bode very well for Trump. What Trump can do about that? Not very much at all. Period. Because it is an international type of situation. According to Reuters, survey of economists, the non-farm payroll increased 145,000 last month after rising 130,000 in August. Job gains average 158,000 per month. Unemployment rate, of course, is at 3.7. That will rise some, but it's not really there. Job growth has curbed, slowing job curved to consumer spending. We'll see that start to happen. And where it's going there, 2% growth. That's not bad given the situation where things are there. 50,000 GM workers are off there. And of course, suppliers and those people out there. Now, this is from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, and we'll go into this also on This Week in Economics. Job cuts announced by U.S.-based firms fell 22.3% to 5-month low of 41,000 there, so we'll just kind of leave it at that and move along here merely. And we'll get to some of this polling and see. Incidentally, we are working on a special on the murder of Bolton John in Dallas. In that case, we've got statements there by Attorney Bill Crump there, the mother of Bolton John. Some testimony from the trial by Amber Geyer herself. So we have all these situations there and some editorial comments from the Dallas Morning News. So we got all this stuff going at once. We got some polling here from Emerson, the poll out of California. Let me just go over this, see where we are. Oh, we're running along here. Okay, running a little faster than I thought. Anyway, Sanders at 21, statistical tie going there. Then comes Senator Harris. She didn't want to be pushed out of her own poll. And Buttigieg at 6, Yang at 3, Beto O'Rourke at 1, Senator Booker at 2, Leon Castro at 2, and Amy Klobuchar. We've been watching Amy closely here, particularly if Joe Biden pulls out of this race, what will happen to Amy? And who will they take over? Would it be Beto O'Rourke? How will Senator Booker fare? Boy, lots of scenarios going here at once. And Emerson poll out of across the street from the Common. Anyway, this is the Ohio primary. Ohio being a very, very important state. A number of statistical tie going on here, almost. Well, it is. Biden up at 29, Bernie at 27, and Liz Warren following up at 21. Kamala Harris at 7, which is good for her. Old Buttigieg at 5. He did pretty good on his fundraising there. Yes, in Ohio. Now, if Biden were to stumble, where all these votes would go? We'll see. But if we look at in Ohio, if we match Biden up with DJ Trump, he's up by 6. DJ is at 53. Biden's at 53. DJ's at 47. And Liz Warren, she's up 4 on old DJ. She's at 52. He's at 48. And Bernie is equal. Bernie's at 53 and DJ is at 47. Bernie always polls better in these polls than some of the candidates that he and Biden are together there, but he is there. Now let's go over here to the Emerson poll, and we'll look at Ohio. Ohio being a very important state here, and I'll just read from it. New poll finds very competitive Democratic primary between Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Liz Warren. No other candidate in the race cleared 7% data. This was incidentally run from the 29th to October the 2nd. And it's a plus or minus of 5.2% there. On issues of impeachment, 47% of the voters support impeachment, with 43% opposing it, and 10% unsure. Democrats by 79% to 14%. Republicans oppose it 75% to 12%. And the independents almost evenly split. And this is one we've been sort of watching, at least some people are. 45% to 44%. There's a divide among supporters of the top 3 candidates. Impeachment, 92% of Sanders supporters, 91% of Warren supporters impeaching the president, while 74% of Biden supporters. Interesting there. All right. Bernie holds a strong lead amongst voters, to get it right, under 30 years old. In Ohio, he captured 52% of this vote, but his numbers dropped significantly with older voters. He received 4% of the vote of those of voters among those over 65. Biden reversed trends, winning 49% of voters over 65, but capped only 3%. That's not good. 18 to 29, while Warren completes an alternative choice of all ages with no significant variance in her total support across groups. Sanders is to a majority of his 2016 supporters in Ohio at 57% still support him. 16% of Sanders supporters now favor Warren. 10% now favor Joe Lunchbox Biden. 8% favor Harris. Biden, on the other hand, holds a strong lead amongst those who supported Hillary Clinton. He receives 47% of the support from Clinton voters, followed by Warren. And this is interesting here, at 29%. And Buttigieg, Sanders, and Harris only 5% there. Professor Kimball, he's director there. There are encouraging signs for Kamala Harris, who's at 7% in this poll. She gets 26% of African-American vote, almost equal to Bernie and Sanders, who both get 27%. These findings in contrast to other states like South Carolina, where Biden has a lock on the African-American vote. But in Ohio, not the case. Different state there altogether. The African-American voters in that state are a little bit more progressive than South Carolina. DJ Trump's approval rating is at 43%, with 51% disapprove, similar to the national average in real clear politics. He struggles. This is DJ Trump, 54%. I guess you can ask H about that. H hasn't at least been using the F word too much lately. 54% disapproving, while 48% of men approve, 46% disapprove, and 46% approve. Approval rating within the Republican Party remains very strong. It's 87% of the vote in a potential Republican primary, 3% for an opponent. Nearly 1 in 3 voters identify the economy as the most important issue for voters in the upcoming presidential election. Healthcare at 19%, social issues 14%, environment's way down at 9%, rounding out to 5%. Democratic primary voters, healthcare is more important issue at 27%, followed by social issues at 21%, and the economy is lower. Impeachment ranks 6. Now this is something I'm going to read it twice. 6 out of 9 issues listed, with 7% saying it's more important in deciding who they will vote for president. Again, impeachment ranks 6 out of 9 issues. Biden and Sanders lead Trump 53 to 47 in potential heads-up match, while Warren leads 52 to 48. Vice President Pence replaces Trump in a head-to-head matchup. He trails Warren and Sanders. This is kind of interesting. I hadn't seen this before. He trails Warren and Sanders 51 to 49, and Biden by 8 points. Interesting. Pence, a closer race with Pence. Hadn't seen him head to head. Yeah, let's look at a little bit of this historic here. They're looking at this. This is on the 29th through the 2nd here, and I was looking at some of these. Okay. Anyway, we look at Trump Sanders at 53-47, Trump Biden 53-47, and Pence Biden. Pence at 46, Biden at 54. Okay, I got it now. And if we go with Bernie and Biden, it's much closer. Sanders at 51, and this is Pence now at 49, and Warren basically the same thing. As Kimball said, at this point it doesn't appear that the impeachment issue will significantly impact Trump's candidacy. His numbers are compatible with Pence. In a head-to-head matchup, Trump struggles with voters earning under 50,000, getting about 41% against his Democratic rivals. Trump leads with, and this is an important one to remember here, over 50,000. Don't blame it on the working class. When voters are asked if they sympathize more with the GM, with the United Auto Workers at GM in terms of the ongoing strike, and this is the first time I've seen this, wages, health care, and use of temporary workers, at 56% majority say they sympathize with UAW, while 23% said they sympathize with GM, and this is Ohio, and 21% onshore. 76% of the Democrats, 58% of the independents were sympathetic towards the union, while the Republicans are more sympathetic towards GM, with 41% supporting GM to 33% supporting the UAW. Ohio's Emerson poll was conducted on the 29th through 2nd under the supervision of Dr. Spencer Kimball. And let's see, 837 was in there. So there we go. Anyway, this is it. And let me look at our time here. Well, we have time to get through California. This is a crosstabs, the whole enchilada here. And we probably got to save this enchilada till, I shouldn't say that anyway. So next time, Californians and their government, I think we're probably going to do it on the week it was. The PPIC statewide poll, a voice for the public on the issues that the public likes. And California Institute there, we had time to do this. Has an embargo on it, and it was released on the 2nd, and today is the 4th. Anyway, as San Francisco, as the presidential primary is closer, Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders lead by a wide margin. However, many voters say they would consider supporting a candidate other than their current choice. The Public Policy Institute of California, this is their poll. As registered Democrats, the Democrats leading independents support Liz Warren 23, Joe Biden 22, Bernie Sanders 21. And Kamala Harris at 8, own state. Buttigieg at 6, no other candidate more than 3%. So they aren't going to be playing in California. I guess they'll get that and make up some money. Amongst Californians, about 1/3, 30% adults, and 35% likely voters approve of the job DJ Trump is doing. The president's approval ratings are similar in January and last September. Fewer than half approve of the job done by Dianne Feinstein. Then she's always been low in approval, 40 to 44 likely voters. Kamala Harris, 40 and 43. That's not good for Kamala Harris. Roughly half, 49% and 51% of likely voters approve of their representatives in the House, etc. California gives Congress lower ratings than 2 senators and House members. Homelessness and the economy are viewed as the top issues facing the state. Californians are more likely to name homelessness, 15% and 16%. Jobs and the economy there are the big ones in the state of California. The most important issues vary in regions. In Los Angeles, 1 in 5 residents, 21 identify homeless, while 1 in 5 in San Francisco name housing. Plurality is in the Central Valley, 19%. Inland Empire, 14%. Orange in San Diego, 14% identified jobs and the economy's top issues. Many Californians are concerned about the overall direction of the state. Fewer than half, 46%, and 41% of likely voters say the state's headed in the right direction, while 48% of adults and 54% of likely voters say it's headed in the wrong direction. More views immigrants as a benefit to the state. That's 41% there, at least 6 in 10. This view since back to January of 2013, and we look at in Los Angeles, 76% are more likely to view immigrants as a benefit. 73% in the Bay, and 72% Orange and San Diego. Central Valley, 67% inland. Empire, 67%, and older adults, 59%. That is 55 and older, less likely than younger people, 79% there. Half of Californians worry a lot, 29%, and some 21%. That they know may be deported away. Most Californians oppose restricting abortion and access. Roe v. Wade, that's something that could be seen in the Supreme Court. A majority, 66% and 73% of likely voters, according to a Gallup poll conducted in June. 60% of the nationwide do not want Roe overturned. Floods, wildfires, we talked about that coming in here as national issues. 29% are somewhat, and 54% knowledgeable about preparing for disasters. Disasters are big in California. In the wake of some mass shootings, one in Gilroy, 68%. Say laws covering the sale of guns should be more restrictive, while 10% said they should be less restrictive. They're out to lunch. School bond has slight majority of supporters amidst economic concern. A $15 billion bond for schools, colleges, construction has been approved by the legislature. That's for the March 2020 ballot. And that is favored by 66% of adults and 54% of likely votes. Depends how they go. Confidence in the voting system amidst concerns. Just one, a great deal, 1/3 there, quite a lot, 18%. Confidence and down from 26% deal, 25%, quite a lot. Well, so anyway, this is national issues. 15% homelessness, 15% jobs. California's provided mixed reviews about the state's outlook on the economy. Most Californians, 83%, say they're at least somewhat knowledgeable about disaster preparation. I think this is just a summary here. We'll go right over top issues in the state. Well, I mean, we already talked about that. Homelessness, 50% of likely votes. We already went over that. So, in other words, this is where we stand here. We gave the results from the playoffs tonight, so we were roaming right along here, doing pretty good. And we talked about upcoming shows here. President Xi, that'll be on BR on the World. And we'll talk about the economy, particularly the unemployment numbers, etc., on the Numbers Man show, which comes up this weekend also. We don't have an open source report, not of yet, and we need to do the one in Dallas. The reason we're doing that is because it is coordinated, as the attorney there, Ben Crump, said, between all the police-involved shootings from Ferguson to Mr. Rice in Ohio, the Sandra Bland, also there in Texas, and then various others, Justine DeMond in Minnesota. They're all connected together, so we should do these national connections. Nonetheless, have a good weekend, everyone. We'll see you on the week that was, on Saturday, perhaps Saturday morning or Saturday sometime. And we also have the Monday morning quarterback on the Boston Red political side here. And with something, we're going to do something about the playoffs. The wild cards are done. The Nats made it into the big show, so to speak, there. And the Rays made it there, but of course, the other one, almost forgot about them. The Rays and Oakland, the Rays defeated Oakland, so they're out of the game there. And I guess you'd say, unfortunately, I believe for the Rays, they have to face Houston, the Astros. Oh boy, good day.